Taking babies or young children away from their parents is something that should not happen and should only be a solution if there is truly no other option. The authorities in the German Democratic Republic, however, had no qualms about doing this. This video is about East Germany's stolen children. Hi and welcome to another East Germany Investigated video. Today we have a closer look at how and why the East German state managed to take away young children from their parents. There are many cases where the state went too far, which for thousands of East German parents and children had consequences that are still being felt today. But before we continue, I'd like to thank you for liking, sharing and subscribing. Please continue doing so in order to help this channel grow. A special thank you to all of you who have given their super thanks. Now let's get started. The East German state strongly encouraged young couples to have children. The GDR was planned to be a young, strong socialist nation. When people got married up to a certain salary, the state would provide the couple with an interest-free loan of 7,000 marks. With the birth of the first child, the debt was reduced by 1,000 marks, and with the second child by another 1,500 marks. If a third child was born, the loan was written off completely. The state provided sufficient nursery places for mothers to continue in employment. In the GDR, the upbringing of children was a civic duty. Therefore, the state interfered anytime and anywhere it thought necessary. It was even laid down by law. The Familiengesetzbuch, the family code of the GDR, stated, "It is the foremost duty of parents to raise their children in trusting cooperation with state and social institutions to become healthy, joyful, capable and well-rounded individuals and active builders of socialism." And in the next section of the same paragraph it says, "The upbringing of children is both the responsibility and concern of the entire society. Special attention is given to supporting families with many children and to single parents." There were many people and institutions involved in the upbringing of children in East Germany. You had the district school councils, Bezirksschulräte, and the Ministry of People's Education. Its minister, Margot Honecker. There were also the youth welfare offices in the GDR. The interior minister. As of 1963 till November 1989, that was Friedrich Dickel. They all played a role and were able to decide on the fate of many children and their parents. And just to put things into the right perspective, as everywhere in the world, in the GDR there were of course many cases where children were taken away from their parents and put in children's homes completely unrelated to the political orientation of the parents. For example, if the parents were alcoholics. Alcoholism was a serious problem in the GDR, by the way. Or in cases of serious neglect or abuse. In these cases, the circumstances mostly justified taking away a child from its parents so that it was able to grow up in a safer environment. But in the GDR, the interests of the state were considered much more important than the importance of individuals. As soon as parents showed signs that they were not raising their children to become builders of socialism, and they made no secret of it, they could easily get into trouble. For example, if you openly complained about the state at work, your employer would advise you to stop, informing you that continuing would affect your career. If you had young children and the authorities for some reason already had their sights on you, the chances were that as a parent you would be informed that your children would be taken away if you didn't change your behavior. Young mothers with rebellious behavior who had several children might get a visit from a youth worker. And if that person was not happy with what he or she saw, he or she alone was able to decide if a child needed to be taken away. Quite often, someone close to the family, say one of the child's grandparents or a next-door neighbor, provided information to the authorities, which gave them the ammunition to act in an even more targeted way. Young families regularly tried to escape from the GDR. The parents just didn't want to see their children growing up in a dictatorship. They mostly had already made one or more applications to emigrate, which unfortunately only complicated things for them, because it meant the state would keep a closer eye on them. The Interior Minister had set up a secret regulation for cases in which parents had escaped from the GDR and left their children behind. The parents often chose this option, trusting in the international right of family reunification. If the parents, after a successful escape, requested that their children be sent to the West, there were GDR regulations forbidding this. It was the GDR's way of punishing those who had fled and setting a signal to those parents who were planning to do so. And on top of that, the GDR could then hold on to the children and raise them to the desired East German standard. What happened to the children once they had been taken away from their parents? The state put the children into children's homes, and as a next step they could be put up for adoption. The adoptive parents were of course couples that were loyal to the regime. Sadly, East Germany was not the only country where children were unjustly taken away from their parents. Similar things happened in Spain until the 1980s. Back to East Germany. There were many cases where, because of the lack of love and affection in the children's homes and from their adoptive parents, the children developed behavioral disorders during adolescence. Then they were placed in so-called Jugendwerkhöfe, youth detention centers, which for children were hell on earth. The horrible things that happened in those places deserve a video of their own in the future. But that is only half of the story. Besides holding on to the children of parents who had fled and taking away young children from their parents, in the utmost secrecy, the East German state went further. In hospitals, when women had just given birth, the state intervened as well. What happened was that after a child was born, mothers were forced to sign a document agreeing to the adoption of the child. There are cases where mothers were not even allowed to hold their child and while still recovering were confronted with the adoption form. It was also quite common that pressure was applied to the parents by telling them that if they didn't agree to an adoption, their older children would be taken away from them. They were urged to keep their mouths shut towards family and friends. They had to lie and tell everyone their baby had died. The motive of the state for these kinds of practices was again the belief that these children would not be raised in line with socialist standards. Recent investigations have revealed a pattern, showing that most of the mothers were women that openly refused to live in the way that the GDR system wanted everyone to live. They wanted freedom and publicly criticized the system. And now for the last and most inhumane variant of the methods used in a German Democratic Republic to take children away from their parents. This system was again practiced in hospitals, and it was only quite recently, due to DNA analysis that nowadays can be performed, that hard evidence was discovered. Parents were told that their newborn baby or toddler that had been in hospital had died, but in reality they had been taken away from them and grew up in another family. Research done in the last few decades has revealed that there are mysterious cases where women gave birth to a child that was immediately taken away from them after birth. Shortly afterwards, the medical staff would inform them that the baby had died. In some cases, women had been anesthetized during or after giving birth. When they came round, they were told that the baby hadn't survived. Of course, the women wanted to know what had been wrong with the child, why it hadn't lived. That question was either answered with a lie or not answered at all. They weren't allowed to see their child or give it a proper funeral. You might wonder why all these parents didn't insist on seeing their deceased child or getting a proper explanation. Well, you have to understand that this was not so easy in the GDR. The doctors were authority figures, and parents who didn't give up telling everyone about their open questions, for example at work, were told to stop because it might otherwise affect their career. Under a dictatorship, there simply were no other options left than to keep silent and pretend you'd got over it. After German reunification, many parents started to investigate, trying to find out more about the real reason for their child's death. But that wasn't easy, as civil records and hospital archives are not easily accessible due to data protection. Only very recently, in-depth research has been done on a number of cases, and some really strange facts have come to light that support the suspicion that in many cases the children didn't die at all. For example, some of the death certificates look mysterious, containing a mixture of handwritten and typewritten text. It seems that not all information was available at once. The question is why? Some strange abbreviations were marked in the margins that cannot be matched with the abbreviations that were commonly used at that time. A number of certificates have been found that contain data that cannot be correct from a timing perspective. For example, a woman was informed that her child had died in the afternoon, but the document gave a time of death in the evening. There are also a number of known cases where a child had been born prematurely and needed to be transferred to a regional hospital with better facilities a few hours' drive away for better care. Unfortunately, the baby was then said not to have survived. But how could it be that the time of death that occurred in the regional hospital was so close to the time of birth in the local hospital, meaning that the transfer must have been unrealistically fast? The cases from the 1970s that indicate this kind of transport are even more curious, because facilities to transport premature babies didn't even exist in East Germany in those days. As I mentioned earlier, parents were not allowed to see their deceased child. But what had happened to it? Here too, the answers that they get now, 30 or 40 years after the incident, are unsatisfactory. There are still a lot of open questions. The number of reunited families is low, and many women are still looking to find out the truth about their child. The problem is that under German law, adopted children are allowed to look for their natural parents, but not the other way around. But there will be many children that were never told that they were adopted. Archives that may contain helpful documents are mostly not accessible to them or just no longer exist. Medical files were destroyed after 30 years. Sometimes the mothers find interesting information in their Stasi file, the file composed by the East German State Security that had been spying on them. A small breakthrough came in November 2019, 30 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. A change in legislation was made that allows the files to be consulted for research purposes. When former medical staff are traced and asked today about what they know or if they can confirm that children were taken away and given to adoptive parents, they mostly don't want to talk or get angry and deny everything. Former doctors, nurses, midwives, people in supposedly caring positions seem not to care about the traumatized women when they asked for the truth. And sometimes they are still active in their profession. The silence of the former medical staff only strengthens the suspicion that children reported dead are still alive, and that what everyone suspects is true and happened more frequently than we might think. Today's German politicians are not interested in supporting the victims. It would take time and money to compensate them, requiring changes in legislation. The general tone in Germany is that people want to forget about these problems from the GDR, so the victims are ignored. The Interessengemeinschaft Gestohlene Kinder der DDR, the Association for the Stolen Children of the GDR, founded 10 years ago, has been working hard to bring the topic to everyone's attention. They are the place to go for the people in search of their child, and they also offer comfort and understanding. They already have succeeded in getting a change in legislation and having the state making some money available to compensate victims. Even today, it is still hard to estimate the number of children taken away from their parents. There are no official numbers, but the total is estimated at around 10,000. The best way to establish the truth is through the medical staff, but the practice that these people were a part of apparently still doesn't disturb their sleep. Stay tuned for some links to other videos that might interest you, and don't forget to subscribe. You may also like to check out the shorts that I've created some months ago.